I've spent my professional life as somewhat of a misfit toy and a cowboy. And I think America is, probably one of the best places to be that way because there's so much infrastructure, there's so much kind of cultural bias towards like risk taking and thinking big and taking chances and taking a shot at your dream. One of the most important roles as a startup CEO is it's your job to turn everybody that's going after your mission, to turn those people into superhero versions of themselves. I think people that say, oh, hire slow, fire fast, my hot take is the people that say that are extremely weak entrepreneurs. I realized it was insanely difficult just to even begin. Like, where do you find these clinics? How do you assess them? How do you know if they're good? How do you even get in communication with them?
Maxim Wheatley, thank you so much for joining me today on the Ridiculously Human podcast, buddy.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
No worries, man. We were chatting at the start of this, just talking about accents and stuff, because I was like, oh, your accent sounds a little bit different. It's like not American like I was kind of expecting. But yeah, looking at your name, like it sounds very British. You actually, yeah, you grew up in the UK, and yeah, you headed to the States with your father when you were around 11. That's a pretty cool story. Don't know if you mind sharing a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, it was a great experience, and on the accents front, right, it's very funny that I think at this point I really do confuse everybody. I've been mistaken for almost everything, I think, and people seem to hear what they're used accustomed to hearing. That's my best theory. Um, but yeah, moved from England when I was quite young, over to Chicago. My dad was brought over there for his work in the telecom industry, and since then I've been all over the place. I've been fortunate to live in many of the best cities in my view in the US. Went to university in Washington, D.C., went up and down to New York quite frequently, lived in San Francisco. LA is now a home. I spent a fair bit of time in Shenzhen and Hong Kong for work. So I feel like I've had a good sampling, and I think even though the experience I had being, I almost feel it's unfair to call myself an immigrant because there's almost like a connotation of something harder than I experienced in many respects. But I think that general experience of being an immigrant and having that like global perspective, is something that you can easily take for granted as, as a kid and as a teenager. But then as you get older, you start realizing that you can just draw from a more diverse set of experiences and think about things through many different lenses. And I'm really fortunate that I've had that chance and met a ton of really interesting people and had great adventures along that way.
It's so interesting that you say that because like that's your normal, right? Like your normal is having all these sort of experiences and being living in all these different places and experiencing different cultures and stuff. And that's what you always draw on, like I guess when it comes to say business or relationships or whatever. And but it's just not normal, like for me, I'm kind of very similar to you. And sometimes you almost need to, well, you often need to take like a step back sometimes when dealing with people to go, okay, cool, wait, I'm actually coming from a completely different place in this conversation or this relationship or whatever. Let me try to understand a bit more from this person, what they are trying to tell me or do.
I think that's exactly true. And I think we can take it for granted that many people for whatever reasons, right, they've maybe been fearful or they've just not had the fortunate opportunities to see that kind of like broader perspective of the world. And it's not a knock against them, right? It's like just the hand they've been dealt, and it's always important, regardless of whether it's like where they've been in the world or the experiences that they've had, to incorporate that into how you're thinking about engaging with them, speaking with them, selling to them, right? If you're in business, right? But it's, I think one of the biggest mistakes we can all make, right, is taking the perspective that our own experiences and the way in which we're seeing things is something that can be easily understood, or like the default settings of someone else. And I think figuring out like where those mismatches in those default settings can make for really great connections. And I think about that a lot through the, in business in particular, right? In sales and pitches, just understanding like how can we make sure we speak the same language, even if we don't initially, and I enjoy geeking out on that for sure.
A friend of mine, he always like says that people are living different realities. And I always kind of refer back to that, especially like in more sort of maybe tough or confrontational moments. I'm like, okay, cool. Well, they are coming at me because this is their reality. And my reality is so different. So, you just got to, if you can try, I think, approach things that way, then it will make things a little bit easier in whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. But I was just wondering, but do you say you have let's say there's a soccer match, right? And it's America playing the UK. Who are you supporting?
Well, the my first answer to it is I disappoint a lot of people that I'm not a fan of football slash soccer as an Englishman. Um, I think at this point, I certainly identify as an Englishman. The US is definitely home. In many ways, I consider myself quite like a patriot of both countries. Being an entrepreneur and having spent my life, I always joke that I identify that I've spent my professional life as somewhat of a misfit toy and a cowboy, and I think America is, probably one of the best places to be that way because there's so much infrastructure, there's so much kind of cultural bias towards like risk taking and thinking big and taking chances and um, taking a shot at your dream. And it sounds maybe a little cheesy, but I think that part of it in particular, has become like really near and dear to my heart. And I think that way because I've had conversations with so many founders and so many entrepreneurs in other countries where you can just tell either implicitly or explicitly that they are contending with an environment that maybe is supportive, but it isn't the same level of encouraging that at least has been my experience here in the US in that realm. So I'm quite a patriot in that respect, where I'm very grateful that the hand I dealt led me to where I am, where I can be, living life as a cowboy and taking those chances.
When I first went to America, I think I was 18 years old, and I went to go work in a summer camp. And one of the things that stood out for me was like how extroverted Americans were. And like compared to, I'm from South Africa. I just lived in the UK for a few months before moving to America, or going there for those 4 months. But that I've actually thought about that a lot, like over the years. And I think that's why America is so successful, because that ties in nicely with risk taking, like being an extrovert. I guess those two sort of personalities tie in nicely. And yeah, it's very obvious. Especially there's some crazy statistics, or like, yeah, some numbers that were posted recently between the US and the EU, right? In terms of like the economy or the GDP or something like that. Um, and at one point, I think Europe was like almost double the size of the US. And we're talking about the whole of the EU, right? And then in the last 15 years or something, America's just grown like to double the size of the EU, and that just says a lot about the way that they actually go about business. One is super risk taking and one is super conservative.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it sounds super, super cliche, right? But it's just the idea of like dreaming as big as you can and then going and executing on that big dream, right? And I think it's there's no there's nothing wrong with dreaming on smaller scales in a business sense, right? The person that wants to start a fantastic bakery and simply take care of their family, it's a ton of work. It's a noble pursuit. It's impressive when it works, and that is great too. But I think there is just like a willingness to accept what might be considered to be like wildly unrealistic or arrogant or hubris or whatever you want to label it as, right? But I think there's definitely that culture of like, yeah, if you want to think on Titanic scale and go do it, right? You could like prove it, and worst case, maybe someone will laugh at you. But I think there is a willingness to just think on grand scales that I really really enjoy.
I have a previous guest, Adam Rossi, a lot to thank for. He effectively provided this introduction, and you and him have a close bond. You wrote a tweet about him recently. You said, "In more ways than one, I owe my life to my mentors. I've been extremely fortunate to have a few on my journey thus far, and I attribute so much of my own development and success to them. None have been more impactful than Adam Rossi. If you don't follow him, you should." And I totally agree. Like, he is a very sort of special man. And I'd just like to know, like, how did you guys actually meet?
Yeah. So Adam is truly I'm honored to call him like one of my best friends, and he's been a mentor of mine for going on 10 plus years now. And we've done all kinds of interesting things together. And the way we crossed paths, he was the first investor in the first real company that I co-founded. Not long after college, actually. I was about 23 or 24 years old at the time. And he was connected to Virginia Tech, where my co-founder was a graduate and about Adam's age. They may have even been in the same class. I can't recall now, but I think Adam and I just really immediately connected because certainly at the time I think I was more of an introverted person, and I was very much on the product and engineering side of my company. And Adam is he's an incredibly skilled and sharp engineer himself. And I think once I realized, like, oh, I have this person that I can chat with and I can share exciting moments with, and this person will understand it on a level that makes me feel more seen. And I can have interesting conversations or discuss challenges in a way that feels like really, really productive, and I can learn from this person. And I'm incredibly grateful we've been able to, like, not just stay in touch since that point, but get closer and closer. And I'm thrilled. He's an investor in my current company, which means a lot given that he's developed that conviction on me, as a founder and an entrepreneur through that journey. I've had the honor of working with his holding company in the kind of M&A side of that, looking at really interesting businesses and figuring out how to get compelling deals done. So he is a dear friend, and certainly one of the very best mentors anyone could wish to have. And certainly I look back on my career in startups where, I think you don't necessarily have the benefit of very structured learning that might come with more traditional career paths, right? Where you might have a HR department giving you, sessions. You might have like a more clear hierarchy of people who are mentoring you and teaching you and helping you level up your career. And it's just a more kind of well-defined pathway, I think, perhaps for some. And naturally in startups, you're the guy doing it, right? Especially at the earlier stages. And it's either you doing it or no one. And if you don't know how to do it, you need to figure out how to do it. And I am very fortunate that along that pathway, I've had quite a few incredible people that have kind of emerged, or I've found them, or they were introduced to me. And not only did they help me with more kind of tactical challenges that I was dealing with at that time, but in many cases became like really good friends and have helped me, I think, to become a much stronger man even outside of business. Just helping me to develop I think, a more kind of noble and high integrity personality, become a more like judicious and hardworking person, and to learn how to be more compassionate, right? Like all those attributes, I can identify in almost every single one of my mentors. And I think I've become a better person both in my personal life and in my business life on account of that.
I think mentorship is such like an important thing, which actually, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, 5% of people uh, enjoy in their lives. Is this something that you like actively seek? Like, is it like, okay, cool, I'm going to look for a mentor, or if these sort of been just like sort of natural flow of a relationship forming? How have they worked for you?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could provide some kind of playbook and say, like, this is how you find great ones. I think on a few occasions I've found mentors who've been helpful, maybe in a more like short-term or tactical sense through just engaging with my own orbit and saying like, oh, I'm struggling with this, or I need an answer to this puzzle that I can't quite solve for myself, or I'm looking for something, right? And you're kind of airing it out to your network, and maybe someone comes out of that. And I've historically found, for whatever reason, that maybe those don't become such lasting relationships, but the ones that have really just come about organically, and I think authenticity is the key, right? Those ones really just kind of blossom. Like the relationship that Adam and I have today, I compare it to where it was in the beginning and perhaps in the middle, right? Early on it was like I'm kind of a little intimidated by this guy. He's an investor in this company. I'm this like young guy. I don't know anything about anything, and I'm just doing my best, and I'm trying to impress him, and I'm trying to impress myself and everyone. And the conversations then were very much like about the things that we're doing. And fast forward to today, I'm lucky that Adam's someone that probably on a weekly basis we might get on the phone and talk for 90 minutes at a time sometimes, and just deep dive on like on life, on business. And he's one of the very first people that I'll text message or call if I'm thinking about something new, or I have an idea or a question with my company that I just want to get reactions on. So that's become a very like organic friendship that the mentor, I would say, like, seek authentic friendship, right? And the mentorship is a really positive side effect of that. And I think if maybe someone was trying to replicate that, if they're going out saying like, oh, I want to find a mentor, it's just going to have that kind of weird dynamic to it. But I think if you go out there saying like, I'm looking for someone who has these attributes, and if we connect, there's a friendship there. That friendship becomes the mentorship. So I guess that's my long-winded answer of how I would go about it if I was trying to advise someone.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, there's no sort of, I guess, right way to actually do it. But like you said, just look for somebody who's, I guess maybe there's like a couple criteria, somebody who's probably walked your shoes a little bit, um, and has a bit more experience generally in life, and that's maybe a criteria to look for, and then go, okay, cool, now I can try find somebody that I can be mates with, and who's also willing to help me. And I think that's also a cool thing, like about humanity, like is people really do want to help, like I'm sure Adam, like he saw something in you, you know what I mean? Like he's like, I either see myself in him, or I can just see that this is a good bloke. Like I want to help him, and I think that we must keep on reminding ourselves that this is actually what humans are, or how they are like. Like we do actually want to help each other, especially in this day and age with like when you look online and social media and just all the shenanigans that are going in the world at the moment. Like actually most people are very nice people, maybe they have some different beliefs and whatever to you, and that's okay. That's what actually makes us survive sometimes, and also thrive as a society. But yeah, generally people are good people and they want to help. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask for help. It's an important thing.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with that more, especially the broader point, if you extract it even beyond this, like the just that phrase, like don't be afraid to ask for help. I think something I could have been benefited from hearing more when I was earlier in my journey, because I was so hesitant to show weakness or ineptitude or lack of confidence, that just so many occasions where it would have been so clear to me now, like, oh, just ask for help, just say it. But it's something I think a lot of people really struggle with. And I like what you said too about that belief, right, that people hopefully are fundamentally good on the whole. And I certainly like to believe that. And it's one of the ways that I often think about entrepreneurship in general, right? Is it's that perspective of you know are you going after something because you are focused on like, what if this goes right, right? What if this does work? And you can apply that to this, right? Like what if people actually are fundamentally good on the whole? And I've found so many of the best moments in my life and the best successes have come from taking that perspective in general of like, like we could come up with 1,000 reasons why X or Y is going to fail or be problematic or be an issue, but let's not focus on playing defense and let's really take a look at like, well, what does it look like if this actually does work? What happens if this does succeed? And in a similar capacity, many of my best relationships, personal, professional, employees, teammates, everything, right? It's generally come from that belief that like if you treat people like they are fundamentally good, sure, you might run into a couple of bruises along the way, and every now and then you're unlucky and coming across someone that maybe for whatever reason it's not the case, at least in your interactions. But I've certainly found on the whole, taking that perspective, it's done nothing but good.
Do you think you've always been wired that way, or was there sort of some change in you which made you believe that, like, looking for the good in people or being optimistic?
I think it must be how I've always been on a certain level. I've always been just a very curious person, and I think that's probably a very common thread with most founders is I've been very curious. I've always wanted to dream about like what is possible, like what could the future look like. Get excited by ideas and like to imagine like how do I make this, like how do I make that a reality? And I think generally I must be kind of a hardwired optimist in that way because it's pretty rare that I'll come across something, an idea is a good example, right? Of like I've not rarely come across an idea where I think to myself, oh, like that's impossible, right? It's like I'm certainly not delusional, and I can see where the challenges are going to be, and maybe refine something to figure out, well, like how do we make this more manageable? But I think I'm just hardwired to take that vantage point on most things of going like, well, that's cool. How can we make that a reality? How can we make it work? And I'm lucky that for whatever reason that was the case, right? Because it could have been the inverse, and life might be quite different.
Yeah, and I think it often is that's how you were born. Like there's a lady, her name is Carol Dweck, I think you pronounce her name. She wrote the book about around growth mindset, and like what you're talking about is effectively somebody who seeks or sees at least opportunity. Like that's your first sort of, like that's the first thing that you see when something sort of pops up, as opposed to other people who have that sort of fixed mindset whereby, okay, cool, they see something, they're like, oh no, well, they'll think of like 50 problems or they'll meet somebody who's like, I don't know, say like really like a happy, bubbly person, and then they'll immediately like judge them. So I think sometimes we are just very lucky that we were whacked with this optimistic wand when we were born. And that's how we view life and that's our reality. So, yeah, however that gets decided, I'm glad that guys like you and me were at least in the front of the queue then.
Absolutely.
I was wondering, but you have like obviously very interesting life from a business perspective. But there was something and I don't know how true this is at all because I asked, I was like, let me see what Grok can tell me about you. And one of the things that it said is that you have trained as a rescue diver. Now, is that correct, or have they picked up somebody else?
No, that is true. I am a trained rescue diver. And I'm a trained emergency first responder. And I don't really get to practice those skills so much lately. But it's something that I have thoroughly enjoyed getting equipped with those skills. And but fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, have played a played a role in helping a few distressed people in the water. And I've done some search and recovery things. So it's a very like thrilling thing. I think that's certainly a common thread across everything in my life, right? So I'm a thrill seeker fundamentally. I think like if it's intense, if it's going to occupy my whole mind, and hopefully be good for other people, then I'm all in almost by default.
So where did you do that training?
Yeah, so it was it's maybe captures a lot of my personality of once I'm all in on something, I'm like really, really, really all in. I'm a for better or worse, I'm a pretty binary guy. Um, so I just had this curiosity about scuba diving when I was, I think, maybe 12 years old, and was looking through like the local park district catalog of like summer activities, and I saw this like like it's called like PADI SEALs. PADI is like Professional Association of Dive Instructors, and PADI SEALs is like this super entry level for you know uh, kids. I think like 11 to 14 or something. Like get introduced to scuba diving, and always loved swimming. I always loved the water, and I still do. And I said to my parents, it's like, this is what I would like to do. And thankfully they said yes. And I learned how to scuba dive in this little swimming pool. And it just became this thing that I think does kind of capture my personality, where it was like, well, like how far and how intense can we go with this? And just kept doing more and more and more. So I got my you know uh, open water diving certificate, my advanced open water diving certificate. I got all of the little sub certifications, learned how to night dive, learned how to do deep dives, wreck diving, learned how to do like various mixed gas diving so you can more safely go deeper. And when I saw like, oh, I can do this rescue diver training, it was a no-brainer, right? So really really a fun little trick that I keep hidden up my sleeve to a certain extent.
Wow. I mean, yeah, the guys that do rescue dives, it's just is the next level kind of skill and experience, I guess. You see things that 99.9% of the world's population will never see or experience. I was in Thailand years ago, and we were doing we were scuba diving, and the instructor for us, he was there when they had the tsunami in, was it 2003, and he said he was actually um, uh, diving at the time of the tsunami, and when he came up, his boat wasn't there anymore, and he had to somehow, I don't know how, but he made it back to the shore in Koh Phangan. So no, where was it? Koh Phi Phi. And yeah, then he became part of the rescue mission there, like basically recovering bodies and stuff like that. And yeah, that's just a whole nother world and experience.
Yeah, it really is. And I think I always like to like look for the common threads in my own life and others. And I think perhaps this tells the whole story, right? Is I think th throughout my childhood onwards, I think I gradually intuited that I have this kind of, now I understand it maybe to be a bit more of a strange or rare attribute, where I feel most at peace and most focused and most effective in situations or conditions that other people find incredibly stressful or terrifying, right? And that's not even to say it in like a macho way, right? Of like, oh, I'm fearless, right? It was like plenty of things scare me, but I think I've come to that realization increasingly as I've got older, that many of those things are that will knock people out of their equilibrium or get them into a place where they're not thinking or behaving in their most effective way. Um, for whatever bizarre reason, are the few places that I feel like I actually am at like true peace and zen. So rescue diving, starting companies, doing dangerous, bizarre things. It works for me.
Yeah, no, the world needs guys like you. I think it's really awesome. One of the things that you just touched on actually before we started talking about this was actually like kind of around like doing business, and you wrote a tweet where it was like, I love innovating and inventing. I used to do it in isolation, thinking up what could be next. Now, whenever I get into this flow, I'll instead set up meetings with the stakeholders that I'm building for. Then I'll let them show me the way. Uh, my job is to translate what I'm hearing. And I think that's like a really important way to actually do business, Maybe I can give like a little bit of more sort of background. What I noticed when I left like investment banking to go sort of on my own journey, um, I noticed that people were very willing to share what they were doing, right, in the business world. But when I was like, say, in the banking world, it was like everyone was like, "Oh, we're all doing our own things," um, and there is a element of like, I guess the business world these days, sorry, like the entrepreneurial world these days, was just like signing NDAs and all these sort of things. But I don't really think that gets you very far. Like because in a way, like you said, you are just kind of like keeping your ideas to yourself, and you don't actually get anywhere by doing that. The important thing is to share your ideas, to let people know, and you never know what they can help you with.
Completely agree. The number of times that I feel like I have regretted not having someone sign an NDA, I can't even like think of, right? Like it's not to like tempt fate, but I have yet to think of one example where I felt like, oh, I should have got that person to sign this confidentiality thing, or I regret sharing that information with them, and here's how it went wrong. But I could write a 500 item list if given the time of where I feel like being forthcoming and engaging with people and soliciting feedback and guidance and reactions has been enormously helpful. And I think one of the ways that I really came to understand this deeply was the very first company that I started. We did operate in quite a bit of secrecy because we felt like that was important, and I was too young and inexperienced to really challenge that, even though I felt in my bones like we really would benefit from getting some reactions here and getting feedback. And I fast forward to today where I really do take the opposite approach. And with my current new company, JetPatient, I think we've done a really good job of that, and it's really been paying dividends. And the example that I would give of how we've really done that is, we one piece of our product, we have this software that helps clinics to manage their international patients and everything that all the challenges that comes with that. And we've designed something that has thus far had incredible reception from clinics and hospitals of all sizes and all specialties and all regions. And I attribute so much of that. I would love to say like, oh, like my CTO and I are just that smart. I think we are pretty smart, but what I really attribute it to is that we've had that discipline as we got started and got designing, where every time we would come up with a new idea or a new insight or decided to design something new, my very first instinct was, let's go see how someone reacts to this. And of course, someone relevant, right? You want someone that's that market, who's actually going to be the user. But it's very exciting to feel those dividends starting to pay now, where I can look myself in the mirror and say, like, every pixel of what we've designed and built here has been informed and tested by really proactively soliciting feedback, and not just soliciting feedback, but like welcoming like the harshest criticism you can. Like many of the best meetings that I had, I would always kick them off by saying, like, not only should you feel comfortable being honest and feel comfortable like upsetting us, because first, you're not going to upset us. You should understand that I will actually be upset if you don't find something wrong with this, if you don't tell me something that upsets you or annoys you about what you're seeing. Um, and we just went through that cycle constantly. In some cases, many times a day. And I really tried every single day. And, we're not going to count our chickens before they hatch too much, but thus far, all of the data we've got for what we're doing is showing that really pays off, because you end up building something that people understand, that solves the right things in the right ways and is intuitive for them, and the rest solves itself, right? You can get away with a excellent product and bad marketing and bad sales and bad everything else, right? But if you've got a trash product with excellent marketing, excellent sales, like maybe you'll lift off the ground a little bit, right? But I just don't think you can get there without being brave enough to take the chances and just engage people. And I think if we were signing NDAs the whole time and being paranoid, it would have been 5% of what I feel it is today.
Yeah, for sure. Like if you think about it, like, you're asking somebody to sign an NDA, but you also kind of in a way you're asking them for help. But you like by signing an NDA, you're saying, I don't really trust you, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
so from a psychological point of view, you're starting off completely on the wrong foot there. And I love the way that you do things. Like there's no better way to improve than getting feedback. It takes a strong person though, I think, to get honest feedback. You have to really park your ego and put that in your pocket and go, okay, cool. This is my baby. I love it, but I need to, I need to improve it. And I want people to be harsh and, critical, like in a good way. And that is one of the most important things, is to actually ask for feedback to improve your product.
exactly. And I'm a big believer in feedback and feedback cycles across the board, especially in business, right? And I think it's obviously important as a CEO in particular to try and build a culture that focuses on feedback and focuses on making sure it's understood to be productive and constructive, and that it's not chopping people down but helping build them up, and that when you're presenting yourself as open for feedback, that you're not being perceived as being like insecure or seeking validation, but really truly wanting to get better. And the probably 4 or 5 times a week, whether it's a pitch, a sales call, whether it's a meeting that I've run, whoever is in my orbit, I'll just ask them, like, how do we do there? Like, what was there anything particularly good? Anything particularly bad? What can be improved? And I'm really excited that the team I've built, I think we've really gotten into that habit across the board, and I love seeing people growing because of that. As cheesy as it sounds, I always like to say that I think one of the most important roles as a startup CEO in particular is, like, it's your job to turn everybody that's going after your mission, to turn those people into like superhero versions of themselves. And you're not going to do that by criticizing them. You're not going to do that by leaving them as is, right? You're gonna accomplish that by figuring out how you can just operationalize, like, let's figure out how 6 months from now you're 3 times better on a variety of levels. And I think about that all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. When I spoke with Adam, one of the things that he touched on was in his business, once it got to like a certain size, and I think it was about 50 people, he kind of, I think it was, he said he lost a little bit of touch with actually maybe say the actual people that they were hiring, the culture of the business. Is this something that you think about for your current company? Like, like at what point do I, yeah, do I let it get that big in the first place? And at what point, like, how do I just sort of keep a culture going, I guess?
It's a really great question. So I've had a few interesting experiences with that myself. So my first company, I think, including some of our interns, maybe our peak headcount was something in like the low 50s. And I think for the most part, everyone kind of knew each other, and there was a lot of like great connections there. But I did have that funny experience sometimes, because my role, leading product and manufacturing and engineering, I was often going to Shenzhen, where we were building our supply chain and manufacturing. And there was a few occasions where I'd come back and there was just new people who I'd never met. And it was a strange and exhilarating feeling. Then fast forward to another thing I did. I was the first employee of a machine learning company, and over the course of about 4.5 years, helped grow it to about 115 people. And that was super bizarre, where there were people that, sometimes in our collaboration apps, I just like see names I completely didn't recognize in photos. I would see people I had never seen before, and it was a funny experience. But I think the way I think about those lessons and the pros and cons of it now is really just looking to figure out how I can build the culture as right as possible and structure it without making it inorganic. Structure it and identify like what are the good things, what are the values, what are the attributes that are working. Get everyone on the team to be carrying that, so that fast forward, my ambition with JetPatient is, I want to build a $25 billion plus company, and whether it takes me 5 years or 20, like that's what I'm on a mission to do. That will require that we're probably quite big at some point. And in anticipating that, I'm very mindful of preaching that as we evolve and as we grow, to say like we need to be mindful of what works and what doesn't, and what attributes make for a great teammate, and what are the things that make this effective today, and how can we collectively work to keep it that way and ensure that as we're hiring people down the line, that we're going to get people that fit that DNA. And naturally, I'm sure we'll have issues at some point, and it'll be my job and the job of others to identify that and try and find ways to correct it constructively, or you know uh, cut things off where necessary. But it's it's a fun challenge. I really enjoy it because I think it's a fundamental piece of what makes a startup work, in my view, because you're not going to succeed with like wildly razzle dazzle benefits, right? You're not going to be able to pay what the Microsofts and Googles of the world are, give them that level of benefits package. You're growing initially, I think, driven heavily by like mission. You're trying to find missionary type employees who are eager to go after that goal independently of what you're doing. And then you're trying to find people who are um, placing a tremendous value on entering an environment that aligns with their values, that allows them to do their best work. And that's something I protect fiercely today, and I always will. I think it's make or break, in my opinion.
How cutthroat are you as a boss? Like if you have an underperformer or someone that just culturally doesn't fit in well, are you like fire quickly sort of guy?
So I've always resented that idea of like hire slow, fire fast, in the sense that I think it flippantly places the blame on the person, not the company or the manager. Um, I think without doubt have my sharp edges. I tend to be a very like gentle, compassionate, coaching, nurturing person. But I think probably like a lot of people that do this kind of stuff, right? Like you have to be very willing to like, you know, be cutthroat, be tough, be rough when it calls for it. But to answer your question, whenever I've had issues with someone that's worked for me or reported to me, um, one of the first things I like to do is like don't put them on the defensive, right? And first engage with it curiously, and question where you may have gone wrong in whatever it is you're dealing with. And obviously there might be cases where it's just a egregious issue and there's nothing to be done. But I think for the majority of cases, I've always engaged with it by first saying like, hey, like I'm disappointed or I'm upset about this thing that I'm seeing or the outcome. And I want to understand why that happened. How was my guidance or expectations unclear? Were there not the correct resources? Was the timeline inappropriate? Did you not have the support? Did you feel like you couldn't ask questions? And if you felt like you couldn't ask questions, why is that? Um, and I think by engaging that way, you can often find like an incredibly productive solution to it. Um, and one way I like to sometimes challenge people is like I'm a big fan of like driving with questions, right? And if I'm raising my eyebrows on something, I might like to ask like, do you feel like this is like the absolute best work you could do? And asking it honestly, not sarcastically, right? But just to say like, yeah, if this is actually the best, and I'm disappointed in it, and we can't find any other solution. Maybe we've got to find a better fit or a better task or solve for that. But I've found oftentimes, you can find that people will be honest with themselves if they feel like they can be and say like, you know what, like it isn't my best work. And I remember one great interaction I had with a report. I did ask that question. I said, I was like, do you really feel like this is your best work? And I even said, I was like, I've seen other things that you've done and we've worked together and I don't feel like it is, but I'm wondering if you do. And I'm wondering if there are issues in guidance, resources, etc. And it opened up a great conversation where he kind of got vulnerable in that moment. He said, no, it isn't. And he's like, I've had a really bad like 10 days. Like my mother's been sick and I've been having, issues with my girlfriend and I've not been sleeping. And I just didn't really feel like I could, share that. And I haven't wanted to take a day off. And it opened up a really productive dialogue, right? Because I was able to say, well, like, firstly, I'm so sorry that happened, and in the future, feels so comfortable sharing that. It's important, and take a few days off. Tell me how much time you think you need to restabilize, and let's figure out how we go back after this thing once you're ready to do a great job with it. And came back, did an excellent job with it, and I for reasons like that, I think people that say, oh, hire slow, fire fast. My hot take is the people that say that are extremely weak entrepreneurs because they are putting all of the onus on the person at fault and almost completely disregarding where they're probably completely screwing up in terms of being an effective leader. Like they're not asking themselves, like, am I being like crystal clear on the mission, the goals, how I'm thinking about what success is? Am I being clear on the timeline? Am I being strong in giving them the resources and the team and the everything they're going to need to go do this? And sure, if you can say yes to every single one of those questions, go ahead, fire fast, I guess, right? But I'm willing to bet my life that 99% of the people that say things like that are checking maybe one of those boxes. So that's when I feel super strongly about because I think a great company is ultimately nothing more than an excellent vision populated with excellent people with the right resources and the right guardrails to keep them on target. And as a result of that perspective, I place an insanely high value on the people that are doing this with me. And to think of them as expendable, fire fast because I screwed up, it's like fuck that, right? And that's clearly this is something I'm quite passionate about. So I know I kind of went off on a Shakespearean monologue there, but that's my answer.
No, I like it a lot. I like how you've thought about it so deeply because I think it is so important. You effectively as a business, you're only as strong as all of your employees. And it's up to you as the person that's at the top to make sure that. First of all, I think this is the biggest problem with a lot of this is people are not trained up properly. Like when they join companies, like I saw it all the time when I was still, back in the day working, say, in like an investment bank. Like you're like, okay, cool, come, welcome to our bank. Like, yeah, we'll train you up for like 5 days and now I expect you to sort of carry on. And it's just like, because everyone else is like so busy with doing everything. And it's like, and then the person like struggles, they struggle. They eventually like some of them will pick it up, but then you're like, well, this person's not performing. They're not good. Let's get rid of them. But we don't look at ourselves going, well, okay, we gave them minimal amount of training. We didn't actually help them enough, like, and I think this can be applied in everything like that you do. And I mean specifically with employees, like if you're hiring, like at the moment I'm hiring like a few virtual assistants, right? Now it's easy to go, after a few weeks, no, that guy's crappy. But what did I actually do? Did I give him like a thorough training? Did I provide him with like, it sounds ridiculous, but did I provide him, say, with procedure documents and this is how you should do things, et cetera, and actually spend time speaking to him? And I think that's the first hurdle where people fall down and then people don't perform.
Exactly. And I think another because I do feel so strongly about this, I think another underappreciated dynamic there is this like always this kind of like dehumanizing perspective that you see in a lot of like tech startup culture in particular, which I really bristle against that. And I think it's naive to a point of almost stupid when people like champion like, oh, but hire slow, fire fast, and act like that's going to be a net win for them. Where I look at it and I go, well, but aren't you also setting up your good players to think like maybe I need to leave fast, right? Because people don't feel valued and secure. They're going to start looking towards the exit doors, right? And I think it's definitely something I feel strongly about that. You gotta set people up for that long-term success. You gotta have like maximum accountability as a leader to make good decisions to make sure you are doing your best to bring the right people in and setting them up for success. And then in terms of managing your culture and ensuring that people are in there feeling autonomous, that they can take chances if it's serving the mission, that you don't want people thinking like, oh my God, I could get fired fast too, right? Like that's gonna develop a culture that is playing defense nonstop, and that's not how you're gonna score your metaphorical goals.
You studied psychology and neuroscience, if I'm correct. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Studied neuroscience and psychology. Much like that rescue diver arc, right? I fell in love with psychology in high school in a AP psychology class, and then I just want to keep going deeper. I want to like, okay, it's cool to understand human nature and how thinking works and how personalities are sculpted, and but now I want to understand why is it that way? Like how's the brain actually rendering that? And just kept going deeper until I landed where I did with my research. I was doing a fMRI based research, so like basically like a video MRI for the layperson, basically. Studying, the brains of children with ADHD and autism and the effect of a molecule called methylphenidate, which is the key piece of Ritalin, ADHD drug, and understanding how that interacts with various neuroanatomy. And it's like that. It's that theme for me, right? It's like, okay, I'm interested. Now let's go as deep as we could possibly go. But yeah, I think perhaps some of those experiences and learnings perhaps informs how I think about like management and culture and leading.
Yeah,
But yeah,
it's way different, but like that, it makes a whole lot of sense the way you're speaking, as opposed to somebody who's maybe say like a CEO that was an accountant or something like that. Like they're not thinking about people really. They're thinking about numbers. So the way you ultimately treat people is very different. And yeah, so it makes total sense. Like, and in my opinion, it's way better the way you're thinking about it, because yeah, you want to build up strong people. So
I appreciate that.
no worries, man. We've briefly touched on it, but your business, JetPatient. First of all, what a cool name! I love it, and I mean, if anything explains a business, it explains a business really well. But the backstory around it is really cool, and I was wondering if you could maybe just sort of spend a couple minutes talking about how it came about.
Yeah, yeah. So Jet Patient in a nutshell, we're building the the marketplace and all of the necessary technology around it to make international medical and dental travel incredibly easy for both consumers and clinics. Medical and dental travel being people crossing borders near and far in search of better, faster, cheaper, more accessible healthcare. And I, as I mentioned, was on route to go to medical school and was doing my neuroscience research and was always a healthcare geek. And a while back, one of my good friends, he and his siblings teamed up. Their father had always had like all kinds of broken crooked teeth, and they teamed up to get him an entirely new mouth, basically. And he told me about this. Oh, we went to Mexico and we did it for like $6,000, and it was amazing. And here's a photo, and that stuck in the back of my mind, and I started just researching more about it. And then fast forward, and one of my family members had a pretty catastrophic and expensive dental issue, full bridge failure in the mouth. And the quote, even with insurance and even with good insurance and with friends and family discounts, with friendly dentists, was astronomical, eclipsing $25,000. And we also maybe had access to the British NHS system, being dual citizens, and you've got a 6-month minimum wait time, and still you're going to pay something. And both of those options just to me seemed unacceptable. And I really started looking into like what's it look like if we follow a similar pathway that my friend did, and let's dive into that. And as I went through that process, even though it was a successful outcome in the end of finding the right place, getting the process figured out, and saving a ton of money, and having a great outcome, I realized it was like insanely difficult just to even begin. Like, where do you find these clinics? How do you assess them? How do you know if they're good? How do you even get in communication with them? Because sometimes that's not even easy. How do you get the pricing? How do you get a quote? How do you get your medical records there in a coherent and safe and secure way? How do you go through the consultations? And I just suddenly looked at this and I thought, well, this seems like a solvable set of problems, and one that I care about, and I need to start thinking about this. So I spent basically 4 or 5 years just studying this market incredibly carefully, um, really kind of going through that scientific process of like, I have my hypothesis, I have my beliefs as to why this isn't being done the way I'm thinking now and what needs to be fixed, but let's figure out if that's correct. But spent 4 or 5 years just researching, studying, diving deep into the way things have been done, which is very old fashioned, very kind of Craigslist style directory websites at best, or these kind of travel agency type businesses in the best of cases. And mapped out like, okay, we think we have a good solution here. And then we got started in basically the end of January of this year, and we've moved really, really fast. We've got 1,900 clinics that are in various stages of process. As we prepare for launch, we've got a fully compliant, incredible product for consumers, like an Airbnb type experience to discover, book, and manage really great healthcare. Um, and then we've built a great solution for clinics to be able to deliver an exceptional patient experience in a compliant way that saves them time, which they love. And we've done all that in course of basically 9.5 months or so. And it's something I care a tremendous amount about. I believe that there's the United Healthcare CEO got shot recently, and it's tragic. And I would never advocate violence in any scenario, right? But I think it's a symptom of a bigger problem, right? Which is that there's a lot of people, you see people being celebratory about that tragedy, and I don't see that those people celebrating it are necessarily bad. I see that like that's just how bad this symptom is, that healthcare has become this unaffordable, this inaccessible, like this hostile to people around the world. And I'm now on this like very like personal mission to right the wrongs that frustrate me and upset me and clearly upset many people, which is let's make it so that it's an empowering experience. Let's make it easy to access. Let's let you make decisions for yourself based on pricing, quality. Let's let you navigate that process in a safe and coherent way. And my hope is that fast forward a few years from now, we'll have helped millions of people save billions of dollars without sacrificing on quality, safety, or experience.
How did the medical sort of bills become so expensive in the US in particular? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably something that would require a multi-hour long answer from someone far more qualified than me. But I feel like I have a decent sense of it, right? And I think you've certainly seen this in education as well. This overall kind of creep of bureaucracy and administration, and That has certainly kind of bloated the costs of healthcare delivery in general. I think certainly in the US, the litigious nature of like malpractice insurance and things like that that adds costs. You've got a ton of middlemen in the process. You've got regulations that, for me, I disagree with. For instance, like practicing physicians can't own and operate hospitals, right? There's a variety of laws that dictate that. So I think much like education, right, where you've got this like kind of payer side in education, it's student loans that can keep going up forever and ever, and they'll always be issued. And in health, you've got this kind of quasi cartel like monopoly of insurers that can maintain a lot of price control, and maybe it can work for them, but it might not really work for the consumers. So you've got this like bloated bureaucracy, you've got this bloated administration, you've got the people who are delivering the healthcare not often even allowed to be part of the real kind of operations and decisions. And I think it's just this superstorm of factors, from litigiousness to the kind of cartel buying like behaviors to the way that the administrations are allowed to run, to the kind of bloat that we've seen with how they operate. And something I always like to say at the end of the day is that I think the key difference I see with a lot of the international clinics that we collaborate with, who deliver incredible experience, incredible healthcare, incredible pricing, is it really just boils down to this simple reality that in the US and in socialized systems too, I would argue, you're not really the customer, right? In our case in the US, right? Like we're a part of that process, but really, it's a transaction between the hospital and the insurance company, and you're not the customer, and you can thus logically expect to have maybe a lesser experience as a result. And I compare that to some of the clinics that we work with where they are the business serving their customer, and the customer is that patient. You see it in all the details. Something that I love is like one of the clinics that we worked with very early on, as part of their intake process, they're asking like, what temperature would you like the room to be? Like, is there a certain kind of music you'd like to be listening to as you're waiting? And to me, I love that idea. Like they bring hospitality to healthcare and they humanize it. And the reason is because because they're not kind of they're not handcuffed by the existing bureaucratic process that's driven for all kinds of reasons. But more importantly and more simply, is because the customer is the customer, right? And how that customer feels matters a tremendous amount, right? And we're in that silly dynamic where it's like I could be as angry as I want about Cedars Sinai, the big hospital here in LA, and maybe they'll care because they are a good hospital, but whose opinion do they really, really care about? It's the one really paying the bill, and that's going to be the insurance company, and that's going to make probably for a less than optimal outcome for patients, certainly in terms of experience and pricing.
It's certainly an industry that is ready to be disrupted. That's for sure. So, say if I have to be an American citizen to use JetPatient, or can I be, say, like South African or British?
Yeah, you can go anywhere, um, as a citizen of almost anywhere, right? Naturally, there's limitations where, we can't take patients from sanctioned nations. So I apologize for the good people of North Korea and other places where they're not going to be able to join, right? So we've got those limitations, right? But for all intents and purposes, anyone from anywhere, if you've got a passport, you can get a visa to where you'd like to go. You have a accepted payment method, then that's really all you need. And we'll make it incredibly easy for you to, based on what you're looking for, find clinics that match what your values are. If you're looking to go somewhere really close, if you're looking to go somewhere with beaches, if you're looking to really prioritize saving money, or whatever it is, right? We're going to make it incredibly easy for you to find that. Take a very careful look at it with good standardized consumable information. If you decide this looks good without having to pay anything. You can get engaged with a consultation, get it scheduled. All of it happens through our platform and it's secure, HIPAA compliant. And then if you are a good candidate for that clinic, you like that clinic, you like who you're engaged with, it's then a really easy process to then go through and get it booked, have flexible payment options, make sure everything is ready to go. We make it easy for both the patient and the clinic to track everything that's necessary. So making sure your travel is good to go, make sure your visa is good to go, make sure your medical records and information is up to date. And it really excites me because I don't have to explain to people why that matters. I think at the end of the day, if we succeed in bringing like more noble, more human, more affordable, more accessible, more innovative healthcare to people, no one's gonna ask me someday like, oh, why were you doing that? And that's tremendously important to me because I think if you're going after something big and you have grand ambitions, then you need to be fueled by something that has meaningful mission, right? Like beyond just figuring out how to incrementally improve a widget of some kind that maybe does something good, but isn't
And,
meaningfully impacting people.
and do you focus on a certain type of, say, like, I don't know, whatever it is, like, is it, are they operations? Are they cosmetic? Like you've mentioned dentistry. Is there anything specific that you're starting with and focusing on, or is it quite like a broad offering?
Yeah, so long term, we certainly want to offer as much as we can reasonably deliver on in a scientifically and medically sound way. And I say that to say that I don't necessarily envision a future with JetPatient where we're finding a way to make like complex brain tumor removals something that happens through a platform like ours. So long term, as much as we reasonably can, and we'll always strive to do it in a medically and scientifically sound way. Where we're beginning is focused very much on dental, cosmetics, longevity, and fertility. So examples of that, like dental, you know, aligners, crowns, veneers, bridges, cosmetics, things like rhinoplasty, facelifts, liposuction, things that people are doing to empower themselves to look and feel their best, which does excite me. I think a lot of that stuff gets a bad rap for being just like pure vanity, right? And surely it can be, and maybe there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm excited about, if we're delivering it in a safe and medically coherent way, I'm excited that we're giving people an option to become the best version of themselves. It's the kind of highest expression of self-care, in my view, if done correctly. And then in fertility, we're finding ways to make a variety of complex and historically very expensive fertility treatments much more affordable, particularly for US consumers. And we're also very excitedly getting ourselves ready to bring a variety of like longevity related things to be a lot more accessible and coherent. So good examples being like certain regenerative medicine, stem cells being a very, well understood one for a lot of people, right? Like how do you recover from chronic injuries, or how do you, maybe resolve, arthritis or certain joint problems. Stem cells is an interesting one. There's a lot of snake oil out there. There's a lot of false promises, and I have a incredible team of doctors in the JetPatient orbit who I run all healthcare decisions by to ensure we're not going to be, engaging on serving people anything that isn't incredibly proven, safe, and legitimate. And I think that's what I'm really excited to lean into, because I think, there's a lot of exciting developments happening with stem cells in terms of injury recovery and helping people live, more mobile, more kind of capable lives for longer. And very excitingly, without invasive procedures in many cases. But I think you could easily argue it's also a space that would benefit from some cleaning up from the consumer perspective to ensure they're not doing anything unsafe, and they're not doing anything that might just, even if it is safe, may just be nonsense, right? Because there's a lot of interests in selling people on dreams that might not necessarily be achievable.
I was going to say you should get yourself on Joe Rogan's podcast. He is like the highest sort of seller of stem cell to all of his buddies, sending them to Colombia and other places to say, "Oh, you've got to go if your knees sore," and all these sort of things. I always hear him talking about it, but it's
Yeah.
very true, you know. And this is effectively what you're doing. You know, you're finding that sort of gap in the market where there's high quality medical offerings for a much more reasonable price, and you making it available to people. And you know, why not, sort of thing. Well, like literally, why not? One final question around like the, I guess the hospitals and the medical treatment and stuff that are just really interested in. Is there any sort of countries in particular which stand out for you, or where you are probably, you know, maybe initially sending more people that have high medical sort of quality offerings and you know, much more reasonable prices? Are there like a few standout countries?
Yeah, I mean there are many, and I think the complex answer is like it definitely depends on what it is you're looking at. Probably unsurprisingly, right? Some regions, some countries certainly have like a incredible strength in a particular competence. And an example I might give of that is that, Panama, of all places, has like a very robust stem cell clinic ecosystem. Colombia and Brazil both have like remarkably skilled cosmetic surgeons for a constellation of procedures, and not only are world class in their skills and their competencies and their techniques, but comparative to certainly Europe and the US, the savings are very significant. South Korea is a nation that's really looking to bring in more medical travelers and have incredible strength in dermatology is like one incredible competence they have. You find interesting like little like hotbeds, right? Like there's a lot of incredible orthopedics happening in places like Qatar and Jordan. And also, surprise, oftentimes a lot cheaper than our US and European options. Um, but broadly speaking, I think where we're certainly focused initially to just make ourselves more operationally coherent is like the broader Latin American ecosystem, in terms of where our clinics and clinic partners are. That being said, we've been building an incredible footprint of clinics, in Saudi Arabia and Dubai and South Korea and Singapore and Egypt and Thailand. Thailand is an incredible place. They have some truly phenomenal hospitals, and you might even argue maybe are kind of the pioneers of what I would describe as like modern medical travel, in the sense that they have been very, very like savvy and focused on delivering excellent healthcare for people who are coming into their country to seek it. And so it's you can almost throw a dart at a map and you'll likely find at least one specialty or one procedure that is delivered incredibly well in that place at a price that is likely superior to many other places. And it makes it difficult to find, which is something that we're excited to be solving for, right? I think even if we just accomplish that for people, just make it really easy to find where those offerings are and where's best. Best being in the eye of the beholder, right? Maybe you're looking for just getting it faster. Maybe you're looking for something a bit more cutting edge or innovative. Maybe best for you is, um, you know, more experience driven. Maybe best for you is just saving money, which is great. And we're going to make it really easy to find all of those things on your terms.
I think it's really, really exciting what you're doing. And yeah, like, man, the possibilities of where this is going to go are kind of almost endless. Uh, but yeah, it's a very, very exciting future ahead. I was wondering, like, in terms of the future, like, is there anything in particular that you have coming up? Is there anything that you are really excited about, other than JetPatient?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, a great question. I am so heads down on it. It's almost embarrassing how difficult that question is to answer. I'm very fortunate to have a really wonderful woman in my life. Her name is Denise, and I'm looking forward to whatever our next weekend adventure is together. We'll figure out what that is and when it is. I'm looking forward to seeing friends and family during the Christmas holidays, where I'll do my best to take at least a couple of days off. So I would say those are maybe boring answers, but I am having so much fun building this that it is very much like the majority of my time, if most days.
Yeah, for sure. It just reminds me of another thing that Adam said, and I don't know if like he's mentioned it to you, but he said in his podcast that we did together that he wished he had maybe done things a little bit slower and taken better care of his health and these sort of things, because he'd also seen the other side of it where he'd had guys that were doing, say, extremely well, but they actually ended up having sort of life threatening diseases because they never took care of themselves. Is that something that you focus on?
It's certainly something that I take seriously, even if I'm not necessarily doing the best job lately of living. That being said, I do I do certainly try to be mindful of my health and take care of myself to the best of my abilities. And it's funny, I did listen to that episode with Adam, and I almost felt like it was in that moment he was almost like talking to me, because I've been pushing very hard, and I'm grateful that even my team have been like really pushing me to like, hey, like just go sleep tonight. Like why are you doing this at like 11 at night or 2 in the morning? So I think my answer to that is that I think maybe in our current phases with our ambitions, that some of it you might argue is maybe not necessary, but is like the right thing to do, right? But I'm also mindful that as we push through like these early days, that given the ambitions of building a $25 billion plus company, which is like the threshold in my mind that's an acceptable outcome, that to get there, I'm going to need to be sustainable, and increasingly find ways to um, you know, give myself time to really recharge and be at my strongest, healthiest self, because it will demand that of me going forward. So you asking that question is another good reminder that let's not over-index on pressing the foot to the floor so hard that we maybe blow the engine up along the way.
Yeah, yeah, but I'm rooting for you. So I want you to, have that full energy available. And yeah, but it's hard, but it's hard to because when you're so passionate, when you're excited, when it's something that's yours, it's hard to sort of take your foot off the accelerator. And there's always something to do, which is part of the problem. You're like, oh yeah, no, I can do this. And we almost need to sort of tame that masculine energy in some way a little bit, just to be a little bit more maybe rational sometimes and go, okay, you know what? I should step away and go and have a walk or at least hit the gym or something like that. You know what I mean? So yeah, sometimes we do just we need somebody maybe just to keep us in check a little bit sometimes. So but yeah, very exciting. But my last question for you is what does being ridiculously human mean to you?
I like that question. I think being ridiculously human to me is figuring out the things you love for no good reason, and then figuring out how to live an authentic life, engaging and pursuing those things without focusing on how other people are going to value or react to it. And it may be like a little like twisted of a convoluted of an answer, but yeah, I think it's like being ridiculously human is like not letting outside perspectives overly influence your own inner dialogue and your own thinking, and getting a grip on like what do you really care about, and then figuring out how to really go after those things, and doing it in such an authentic way that it doesn't matter like what other people have to say or think about it. And it's been my experience that when you engage in life that way, like people actually really love seeing it and tends to work really well.
I think that's such a cool answer. Actually, the way you spun it was really really cool. It makes you think about what it is that you're doing. So thanks a lot. I really appreciate that. And also thanks for coming on the podcast. But like, it's so cool, like having this platform to be able to speak to guys like yourself that I would never really be able to speak to, and sit here and learn from you and hear about your life experience and what you've gone through, because it always gives me something to speak to think about, and reflect on in my own life. And yeah, I think what you're doing is extremely exciting. Like I think probably 25 billion is way too low in terms of what you're trying to what you are in terms of the industry you're disrupting. So I think you've got some serious legs on what you're doing, and I'm really excited for it. I just like think of all these places I've been to, and like and things I've seen over the years, and I'm like, yeah, he should probably know about this place and this place and this place. So I think it's really it's a great idea, but it's yeah, so all the best, and just thanks for sharing everything so candidly and so openly. It's very very kind of you, and yeah, it's been great.
Of course. Well, thank you for the kind words, and I'm super grateful to have the opportunity to be on here and to chat with you. And I'm really glad we're now connected. And I hope maybe some of what I shared resonates with somebody somewhere. And I enjoy talking about this stuff. So thank you for the opportunity.